right now, for the sake of going through all of the motions, let's just say that we have accepted the container for cremation. We have now taken custody. My suggestion is do not ever take custody of the container if you don't have all the paperwork in order, if the container is leaking, something is not right. Don't even take custody, because they're just going to leave it with you. They're not going to want to take it back, especially some of those that may have to drive 25, 30, 40 miles to get to your facility. So don't even take custody. Now, if you have crematory personnel that have given out keys, that the door's unlocked, that your third-party providers of cremations to you just can enter your facility at any given day, time, night, morning, just leave the body and paperwork, you need to stop that now. The reason I say that is because you have no control over what they're doing. You have no control over the body, especially in states where you cannot open the container. That's a problem. That's a very big problem. And if I were looking at in a situation as an expert witness in a case, and they just drop it off, okay, that's problematic for me right from the start. So let's just say we've taken the body. We now have custody of the body. One of the things that you do, if you do not open the container, or your funeral home does not want you opening the container, then have them remove the tag that they put on at the place of death, which we will go over in the litigation section, as far as having the tag that they placed on the decedent at the place of death removed at the funeral home and placed in a plastic bag and stapled onto the container. This gives you identification purposes as to what was put on at the place of death has now been removed at the funeral home and sent with the decedent. Should eliminate a lot of identification problems. If you do open the container, remove the tag, place it with your paperwork. You can see I have all of the cremation paperwork that I need close by, so that if there's ever a question during the cremation process, I can answer it. I have all of the paperwork that I need right here, and I keep it right here the entire time. You never know when an inspector is going to come in, whether it be from the state board or whether it be from the environmental quality people. So you want to make sure that you have everything. You can answer every question that they have with this paperwork right here attached to the machine. So let's go ahead and show you, now that we've gotten the paperwork out of the way, and like I said, we will go over a lot of that in the litigation section a little bit later on in the program. But for now, this is showing you the proper policy, procedures, what to do. I should be wearing personal protective equipment. I'm not, okay? I'm just kind of going over some of the procedures. When we do the actual program, we will have personal protective equipment on. So anyhow, let's just go ahead and, Jim, if you join me, let's go ahead and have the container placed into the machine for a cremation. So what we're going to do, first of all, of course, is raise the door. And we have the tags that are matching, correspondent with everything else. Tag is placed right there in the front. Okay? The ruler is going to be placed inside. Do not, as you can see, my disclaimer, do not place any body part under the door, even with the door locks engaged. So don't be, I have the door locks engaged, but what I'm going to show you is don't be going in like that to be placing the ruler. Place the ruler in with that instrument right there. Now, one ruler is usually sufficient unless you have a heavy body, unless the container, you can see this container has the wood bottom. That's what they should be. They should be suitable, leak-proof, covered for the dignity of the cremation, and therefore one ruler is usually sufficient. If you're doing consecutive cremations throughout the day, I would suggest using 2 rulers. If need be, use 3 rollers. They're only 35, 40 cents, whatever they might be. But if you're putting a body in and this container hits the bottom of that floor and gets caught up, all right, and you have the ambient heat from a previous cremation, it might start this box on fire, and that's not a good thing if you're stuck half of the way in. So what you need to do is make sure you have enough rollers in there, if need be, okay, so that you can have easy placement of the container into the cremator. Jim? You can do this one of 2 ways. For some of those states that require preheating, you can go ahead and preheat prior to the cremation process, or you can go ahead and load the container and then go ahead and preheat. I wouldn't suggest that on 2nd, 3rd, 4th consecutive cremations. I'd go ahead and preheat and then load the container at that point. So, but for the first one of the day, it's your call. Some people feel more comfortable putting it in, preheating, and then starting the procedure. Some people would go ahead and rather get it to that particular temperature and then go ahead. So now we have the body ready, the door locks are engaged, we're ready to go and placement into the machine. Just simply roll it in, place it in with the rest of the machine, the instrument, Jim. Again, do not be putting, if you need to go in further, just place it in further. Disengage the door locks. Door is down. Don't forget your identification number right here in the corner so it doesn't get in with everything else. Because if you just throw it in there, when you go ahead and rake the cremated remains out afterwards, you sweep them out into the hopper, now you got to go through them and try and find your identification tag. So leave that right here in the front, and it's going to be easier for you to retrieve, easier for you to determine the identification if you need to. The door is closed. The pollution control is on. The afterburner. We have now started the cremation process. That's why it's so imperative to make sure you have all of this paperwork on hand, because this process that I've just started is irreversible. We've come to the litigation section of the Crematory Operator Certification Program, which is a very, very important section to help you avoid the courtroom in a court of law. Lawsuits are running rampant. Settlement figures are going out the roof. So that's why I, along with Chris Farmer, CANA's attorney, are going to explain in this next hour and 10 minutes or so, some of the things that you can do to make sure you're practicing the best policies, procedures that you have to avoid the courtroom. Traditional funeral liability, 2 separate things as far as funeral liability, cremation liability. Acts of negligence, okay, are usually correctable, mitigatable, non-compensable. Wrong burial site, bad cosmetics, bad embalming. We've all been there, those of you that are funeral directors, okay? Usually an apology, refund, or some type of mitigative steps will stem litigation. It's bad enough, but will they recover intangible losses, pain and suffering? The answer is no. There's not intentional damage. Okay, you didn't mean to do cosmetics in a bad way. You didn't mean to swell the neck. Okay, you didn't mean to give the cemetery the wrong information on the grave. Okay, uses the axiom to err is human. Now, cremation liability. The potential is disastrous. Cremating the wrong body. And this is what happens if there are not preventative steps in place. Litigation will be certain to follow. Okay, if you do not have people identify the body, has the potential of exceeding insurance limits, will usually end up with a jury trial with the possibility of a runaway verdict. Your authorization form. What should be on the authorization form? Authorizing agent. This is one of the biggest things. Find out from your state who the next of kin is. Who is the authorizing agent? Some states have that if a person came in and made prearrangements, signed for their own cremation, that's fine. They're good. Carefully worded, harmless, no phone calls, no whiteouts, all of that. None of that. Don't do any of that. Okay? If necessary, have the people come in and re-sign. Establishing your chain of custody. Be sure to pick up the right body. Some people think that's crazy. How can we not pick up the right body? Make sure when you go to the place of death, you have them sign a witness of transfer form. You have to sign their documents. Why not have them sign yours? Meaning that in the presence of an employee at that place of death, you had them sign that they identified that body either visually or by bracelet. You put your bracelet on. I don't care how many other bracelets are on that body, you put your own permanent identification ID bracelet on. Why? Because that's what you're going to have removed just prior to the cremation. Make the removal back to the funeral home and not to the crematory. Please, please, I can cite various lawsuits that they took the body directly from the place of death to the crematory. Later it was discovered that it was the wrong body, but it was too late. They have already delivered the body, the cremation process already started. Removal policy, have a removal policy the same way in writing, that it's done absolutely the same way each and every time. No embalming, make sure you have refrigeration. Here again, problems throughout different states because there was no refrigeration. Have the family sign off if they're not going to view the body. Departure to the crematory. Have the decedent identified again. Don't just go by the refrigeration log that you refrigerated the body when you came back. Make sure, don't just bank on it, Ida Wynn being in space number 11. Don't do that. Open up the bag. Look at the tag again. Never assume anything in this business. Paperwork rechecked again for accuracy. Remove the ID bracelet that you put on at the place of death, put it in a clear plastic bag, staple it to the container. That way, when you arrive at the crematory, the operator knows that the ID bracelet that you put on at the place of death is now being removed at the crematory. Do not use a removal service to transport to the crematory. Why? They're not your employees. You have no control over what they're going to do. So make sure to continue to have your chain of custody intact. Use your employees to take the body from the funeral home to the crematory. And again, never remove the decedent from the place of death directly to the crematory. Arrival at the crematory and accepting custody, have a checklist. Date and time of arrival. Who accepted the decedent? All paperwork's in order. The container, casket's acceptable. Decedent placed into refrigeration, or the estimated time to start the cremation process. As we did in our hands-on back in the crematory, do not, under any circumstance, accept that container without the proper paperwork, or if the container is not suitable. If the container is leaking, or whatever else problems might be, do not take custody. You're going to get into a problem. Do not let your third-party providers just roam all around your crematory area. Be able to get in at 2 o'clock in the morning if need be. Why do they need to get in at 2 o'clock in the morning? That body should be going back to a funeral home, not to your crematory. Crematory operator has the right to refuse custody, but they must notify the funeral home immediately and let them know why they are refusing custody of that body. Due diligence. The review and inspection of a crematory's internal operating procedures. to ensure that the crematory handles cremations in compliance with established policies and procedures. And I thank you all for being part of this demonstration here today. We look forward to moving forward with our online program in the very near future.